Concerns are growing over staff shortages in hospital emergency rooms amid the massive absence of trainee doctors, while fewer medical students have returned to school for the second semester to protest the government's move to expand the medical school admissions quota. Korea's inflation slowed to 2% in August from a year ago, the lowest level in 3.5 years, mainly due to lower oil prices. More medal news at the Paris Paralympics. Team Korea clinched gold in boccia, marking the 10th straight gold in that event. It's September 3rd, 6 p.m. in Seoul. This is Newscenter. Thank you for joining us. I'm Yoon Min. We begin with growing concerns over emergency care in the wake of the massive walkout by trainee doctors that started several months ago. In the meantime, fewer medical students are returning to schools as most classes open for the second semester. Choi Min-jung brings the latest.
South Korea is experiencing a lack of medical personnel in emergency care, which the government says is mainly due to the mass resignation of residents in February. During a daily briefing on the medical emergency response on Tuesday, the Health Ministry announced there had been around 590 residents before the February protest, but by mid-August, the number dropped to below 60.
The decrease in the total number of doctors in emergency rooms is due to the mass walkout of residents in February, and it's not a recent change in circumstances, but rather a situation that has continued since the emergency medical system was put into place.
The total number of doctors working in emergency rooms is currently a little over 74% of the average. Despite the fall in the number of residents, however, the number of emergency medicine specialists increased by 66 compared to before February. And to fill the shortage of trainee doctors, the government has decided to deploy military doctors in emergency units starting Wednesday. Meanwhile, medical school students are not returning to class even as schools across the country begin the second semester. The number of medical students who have completed registration at 9 national universities outside the capital area only amounted to around 4% of the total number of medical students. Jeju National University did not see even a single student register. Medical school students have been refusing to return to school in protest of the government's push to increase the medical school admissions quota. Choi Min-jung, Arirang News.
In South Korea, the 1st of October is a day of remembrance and appreciation for members of the military serving the country. This year, the Armed Forces Day will be observed as a temporary holiday to boost troop morale. Our Lee Si-hoo reports.
This October 1st, the 76th Armed Forces Day has been designated as a temporary holiday by the government. On Tuesday, President Yoon Suk-yeol gave his final approval for the designation after the cabinet passed a motion earlier in the day. The presidential office said the decision is to boost military morale by highlighting the values of its members and the importance of national defense and to raise people's awareness for security. Furthermore, the government expects a boost in consumer consumption during the additional day off and therefore a revitalization of the economy. This year, the Armed Forces Day lies on a Tuesday. With the government announcement, many workers are now expected to take an extended break by also taking Monday off. Armed Forces Day remembers the day during the Korean War when South Korean forces advanced through the 38th parallel in a counterattack against the North. The ruling People Power Party first suggested the idea of a temporary holiday during a meeting with government officials last month. The Ministry of National Defense said the designation will strengthen the morale and abilities of members of the armed forces. Lee Si-hoo, Arirang News.
Korea's inflation has eased to the government's target range of 2% in August, but price concerns linger over certain fruits ahead of the Chuseok holiday. Park Go-nu has the details.
Inflation in South Korea is showing signs of stabilizing as last month it reached the government's target. According to Statistics Korea on Tuesday, the Consumer Price Index saw an on-year rise of 2% in August. That's the smallest jump since March 2021. Smaller increases in the prices for petroleum products due to lower international oil prices and farm produce were given as the main reasons. The consumer price index has been under 3% for 5 straight months since April. It has also been continuously seeing on-year falls since then, except for a slight jump in July. While the government also said on Tuesday that it predicts inflation will stay at the low 2% range, one expert says that's not enough.
Before COVID-19, it has been lower than 2%. It is almost, less than 1%. So I think we have a little more to go in terms of price stability.
The price of petroleum products rose by 0.1% on year in August, a sharp drop compared to July, when it spiked by over 8%. Farm products soared by 3.6%, again a smaller rise than July when it jumped by 9%. The price of pears skyrocketed by some 120%. However, according to an official from Statistics Korea, the price will fall with newly harvested pears available soon. At a Vice Ministerial Economic meeting held on Tuesday, First Vice Minister of Economy and Finance, Kim Bum-seok, said the government will do its best to manage prices of high-demand products ahead of the Chuseok holiday in order to keep prices low. He added it will be releasing 170,000 tons of high-demand products, including apples and pears, along with supporting discounts for agricultural and fisheries products. Park Gon-woo, Arirang News.
South Korea's food exports reached a record high in the first 8 months of the year. Data from the Ministry of Agriculture, Food and Rural Affairs on Tuesday showed that the value of outbound shipments rose nearly 9% compared to the previous year to $6.5 billion from January to August. It's the highest ever. This was largely driven by exports of ramen, beverages, and processed rice products, all reaching new highs. Ramen exports for one recorded $800 million during the period compared to 10 months last year. President Yoon Suk-yeol will be hosting Japanese Prime Minister Fumio Kishida this Friday to Saturday. The presidential office announced this through a statement on Tuesday. It added the visit was set as Kishida before stepping down from his premiership, and party leadership later this month has a strong desire to visit President Yoon as part of their shuttle diplomacy, which the two leaders revived, and to mark a meaningful conclusion to his term. It said the two leaders will look back into what they achieved while seeking ways to expand the bilateral cooperation further. In addition, Seoul said it's hoping Kishida offers constructive advice on Seoul-Tokyo relations to the incoming successor. This will be the 12th time that the two leaders have met each other since Yoon's inauguration. An international conference took place today in the South Korean capital to discuss the reunification of Korea at a time when tensions are high on and surrounding the peninsula. Our North Korean affairs correspondent Kim Jong-sil takes a closer look.
The Global Korea Forum kicked off with this year's theme, Unified Korean Peninsula for Freedom, Peace and Prosperity. As in the past year, North Korea's leader has denied the idea of reunification. Now is a critical time to discuss this issue.
The reunification of the Korean peninsula should be achieved in a manner that respects and shares universal values such as freedom and human rights. However, this does not imply forced absorption through power, as clearly emphasized.
Reunification through being absorbed by South Korea is something that Pyongyang fears the most, as it would bring an end to the Kim regime. It's not what the South Korean government is aiming for either, and the ministry explained why it's important to make efforts to bring global attention to this issue.
Reunification is not just a matter between the South and North Korea. It's an affair that requires the solidarity and support of the international community. It's therefore crucial for the South Korean government to take the initiative and make efforts to gain such support.
Many of the panelists also discussed the changing international landscape as factors that may affect the security of the Korean peninsula. The deepening rivalry between the US and China, the growing Russian presence in the north amid the war in Ukraine, and finding a global consensus on the Korean peninsula issue were raised as some of the main challenges.
I think it's going to be very difficult to make practical progress in terms of unification given the current circumstances. The South Korean government could focus on trying to create a better relationship with North Korea. Even that may be impossible at the moment. The Netherlands and South Korea are very strong partners, so they fully support the South Korean government in this.
The Minister of Unification plans to hold a U.S. conference of the Global Korea Forum in Washington this November. Kim Jong-sil, Arirang News.
At the Paralympics in Paris, Team Korea clinched yet another gold medal on Monday. Our Choi Soo-hyung has that match and more.
South Korean Paralympic athlete Jeong Ho-won won a gold medal in boccia at the 2024 Paris Paralympic Games on Monday. The 38-year-old defeated Australia's Daniel Michel 5-2 in the men's singles event for his fourth overall Paralympics gold medal. With this, Team Korea now has 3 gold medals at the Games so far. Also, Team Korea set a record by winning their 10th consecutive gold in boccia, going back to the 1988 Seoul Games. Boccia is a game where players with cerebral palsy or other neurological conditions aim to get balls as close as possible to a target. It was officially added to the Paralympics in 1984. Team Korea's Chung Song-jun also won a silver medal in the same event. And Team Korea added a few more medals, including Choi Jung-man winning a silver medal in the men's singles badminton event after losing in the final to Chi Zi-mo of China. Choi became paralyzed in his lower body due to a car accident in his senior year of high school and started playing badminton during his rehabilitation. It was his first ever Paralympics. Team Korea also added 2 bronze medals. Kim Jong-nam won bronze in the mixed 25-meter pistol event. After becoming disabled in a car accident in 2010, he started shooting in 2013, dedicating himself fully to the sport and won a medal in his first Paralympics in Paris. Another bronze was added in the badminton singles match, where in between 2 other Korean players. Kim Jong-jun defeated Yoo Soo-young, earning his 3rd medal following his 2 silvers at the 2020 Tokyo Paralympics. South Korea is currently 14th place in the medal standings with 3 gold, 7 silver and 8 bronze medals. Choi Soo-hyung, Arirang News.
On the international front, demonstrators in Israel continue to demand Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu seal a ceasefire deal with Hamas to bring home all remaining hostages, following the recent killing of 6 hostages. An Sung-jin has the latest.
Protests in Israel headed into the second day with hundreds of thousands of protesters pouring into the streets. The country also saw suspension of services by general strikes over anger at the government's failure to secure a deal that sees the release of hostages. These are the largest protests in Israel since the attack by Hamas last October. As the overnight demonstrations continued throughout Monday, the country's largest labor union threatened to shut down the entire economy. This comes as public fury grows over the death of 6 hostages who had been seized by Hamas.
When we hear about the 6 bodies that they came back, I think everybody feel like they have to do something, and I think it's one of the reasons that so many people came out from home.
Demonstrators voiced that the hostages could have returned alive if Netanyahu's government had successfully agreed a deal with Hamas. Hamas said that Gaza captives will return in coffins if Israel continues its attacks in Gaza, after it released a video on Telegram of the 6 hostages when they were alive, which demanded for a ceasefire deal. The Hamas statement also said that Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu would be fully responsible for the death of the captives. Netanyahu responded that they were close to the deal and that Hamas will pay a very heavy price for this. However, when asked on Monday whether Netanyahu was doing enough to reach a ceasefire, U.S. President Joe Biden responded no to the reporters at the White House. Biden added that he was close to presenting a final proposal for a deal to release hostages, but negotiations mediated by the United States, Qatar, and Egypt so far failed to reach an accord. Out of the 250 hostages that had been held captive by Hamas since last October, less than half have made it back home. At least 70 have died and the rest still remain unaccounted for, with uncertainty on whether they are still alive. Meanwhile, the UK announced a partial ban on weapon exports to Israel, suspending 30 out of 350 weapon exports licensed to Israel over a, quote, clear risk the exports could be used to breach international law. An Sung-jin, Arirang News.
All of the Koreans who recently traveled to Israel to attend a religious event have returned home. The Foreign Ministry announced Tuesday that around 180 Koreans who were visiting Israel have safely left the country. 140 of them had already returned home last week, and the rest of them left Israel on Monday local time. They entered the country last month despite travel warnings issued for the region. The government said it's strongly urging those residing in Israel to leave as soon as possible, while vowing to continue to take necessary measures needed to ensure the safety of Korean citizens in the country. Russia has shared intentions to revise its nuclear weapon use policy, while Ukraine calls for additional arms support from the West. Lee Seung-jae reports.
While Ukraine continues incursions in Russian territory, Russia is also making advances in key Ukrainian regions. This includes the city of Pokrovsk in the Donetsk region, from where Ukrainians are evacuating and leaving everything behind as Russian forces close in. If Russia takes over the city, it would be a major blow to Ukraine, as it's known as a key transportation hub and logistics center for its military supplies. In response, Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky is calling on the West to lift restrictions on long-range missiles, while also requesting more weapons, which he says have already been agreed upon. Amid the escalating tensions, Moscow said it will revise its nuclear doctrine containing the principles of nuclear weapons use. Russian Deputy Foreign Minister Sergei Ryabkov said Sunday that it will revise the doctrine in order to lower the threshold for nuclear weapons use due to the West's escalating provocations. In 2020, under a decree by President Vladimir Putin, the doctrine says Russia may use its nuclear weapons in the event of a nuclear attack by an enemy or a conventional attack that threatens the existence of the country. One of Russia's biggest allies in China expressed concerns over such threat, stressing that Moscow should regain its composure and prevent a nuclear escalation. Meanwhile, Putin made a state visit to Mongolia on Monday, despite an arrest warrant for the Russian leader from the International Criminal Court. Mongolia is a member of the ICC and are bound to detain those that have an arrest warrant issued for them. The ICC issued his arrest warrant nearly 18 months ago on charges of war crimes in Ukraine. Despite this, the Russian leader was welcomed by the Mongolian foreign minister upon arrival. Ukraine, the EU, and the ICC have called for Putin to be arrested. However, the court does not have any enforcement mechanism that would make the warrant effective. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
100 domestic helpers from the Philippines begin work in Korea starting today. Following a 4-week training program, these helpers will work up to 40 hours a week at 157 households here in Seoul. Amid a shortage of local workers, the government has set up a special program permitting the hiring of foreign caregivers to look after children. 60% of the Koreans who've signed up for the 6-month pilot program are working couples with multiple children. Eventually, the government hopes to expand the number of foreign caregivers to 1,200. Researchers here have developed a system that can predict soil creep, meaning the process of soil slowly moving down slopes under the force of gravity. Our Cha Yun-kyung tells us why this development is important.
This is near Toamsan Mountain in Gyeongju, 2 kilometers away from Seokguram Grotto. There is a depression in the center of the mountain. Soil creep and landslides appear similar, but there is a distinction between them. A landslide happens all of a sudden, while soil creep is slow and consistent, bringing the risk of recurrent earth movements. There are distinct differences among their geological features, soil consistency, and moving speed. Most earth movements that occur in mountainous areas of South Korea are likely to be landslides, which occur on steep slopes of 20 to 40 degrees. Recently, soil creep has been observed on gentle slopes of less than 20 degrees. National researchers have made progress on a prediction system that will notify them of soil creep in its early stages. The research team installed various sensors, such as wire extensometers, groundwater gauges, and displacement meters for structures that are connected via wired and wireless systems to a central monitoring station. While existing landslide prediction is focused on shallow collapses of land, the soil creep system monitors not only surface layers but also deep underground. The system can remotely predict the emergence rate and extent of soil creep through the sensors, also incorporating GPS, without the need for the physical presence of researchers. Another strength of the system is that it can be used regardless of the weather.
While humans had to make physical measurements in the past, the remote system allows us to check on-the-spot information through ICT with values observed by the sensors.
More than 60% of cases of soil creep are initiated by artificial changes to the landscape, such as the building of roads or industrial complexes. The research team plans to monitor soil creep nationwide by installing remote systems in mountainous regions across the country. 차윤경, Arirang News.
The fresh autumn air continues in the morning and the evening. However, the sun is still hot during the daytime and the temperature will rise to 32 degrees Celsius, showing a late heat tomorrow. At least for the next week, most areas will exceed 30 degrees. It also rains sporadically in Jeollado province and on Jeju Island. Jeollado province will have rain until today and Jeju Island will continue until tomorrow afternoon. The amount of rain on Jeju Island will be up to 40 millimeters. Tomorrow, Seoul and Gwangju will start off at 22 degrees. Daily highs will move up to 31 to 32 degrees all over the country. It will rain in the central parts on Thursday and most parts of the country on Friday. However, the amount is small, so it will not cool off the temperatures. That's all for Korea. Here are the weather conditions around the world.
That is Newscenter for tonight. Thank you for watching. A panel session coming up.